This show is brought to you by Go Live TV. Download the app now.
Welcome to Law and Reality. I'm Joe Volpe, the publisher of Corriere Canadese, North America's only Italian language daily newspaper, and I'm here on behalf of Go Live TV, which, as you know, reaches the Latino, Hispanic language community of all of Canada, and the Portuguese community of all of Canada, Brazilian as well as Azorean, and I shouldn't even say that because they're one and the same.
Well, not really.
Portuguese mainland. So we're here and we're going to be talking about law and reality as it relates to immigration. Now, the topic of the day, we've talked about language, we've talked about numbers, we've talked about quotas, but we haven't talked about the provincial nominee program, the PNP program. And with me is none other than the author of Law and Reality, noted lawyer, Richard Borax.
Sir.
Now, Richard Borax, you want to talk to us, everybody who's viewing us, about the PNP program, and if we can, make it specific to Ontario.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you here today, Joe, because you are the father of the PNP program. When you were minister, you
I hope that works out better than my 4 kids.
Well, that's for us to decide today, perhaps.
Okay.
And it's important to note that you pretty well forced Ontario to start on the PNP path. Ontario traditionally did not want to get involved in immigration. They wanted Ottawa to decide everything, and unlike the other provinces, Ontario did not want to take a position, and you came in with a lot of money, as I recall, as minister.
$1 billion.
$1 billion, which they blew. But that having been said, at least you got the process under control. And it suffered birth pains. And here we are. So maybe at the end of this little show today, I'll ask you what you think as the father of the whole thing.
What the provincial nominee program is.
I'm sorry?
What is the provincial nominee program?
Tell me, what is it? What was it supposed to be?
It was supposed to take the place of employers in the usual system of sponsorship to get people over here because the province, in this case the province of Ontario, recognized the need for those individuals and said, you're being sponsored by the province of Ontario. Therefore, Government of Canada, issue the appropriate permit.
You said the key thing. It was geared towards employers taking a leading role in what they needed on their job sites.
Yeah, essentially the province was stepping in where employers weren't.
And that, I think, today, if nothing else, we'll go through some of the details, but I think that's where Ontario has gone off the deep end with complexity. And if you'll bear with me for a second,
you mean they've made it more complicated than it used to be or needs to be?
Oh, my Lord. I remember when the Ontario immigration was run by one man, Jim Carrick, who got the job done. And bodies were flowing into Ontario, and there were no computers. I sound like an old man. But Jim would talk to the employers, ask them what they need, and it would be approved. And it worked. They built a better Ontario, I think. And now just from the trades workers, because that's the audience I think we're addressing here. Trades workers, there are 3 programs, streams they call them now, 3 streams in Ontario for a carpenter, a bricklayer, and other trades. There's a total of 8 streams. So here we have more of the high-techy and politically push streams, things like the new program for tech workers, the program for Franco, people who speak French.
Up in Northern Ontario and Eastern Ontario.
That's
primarily.
right. And then we have the program for rural communities.
All Southwestern Ontario and then any of the northern or mid-northern.
Then we have the entrepreneur stream.
It's anybody who wants to make money.
Well, hopefully.
Starts a business.
And then we have what they now call the in-demand skills stream, which we're going to get into.
So let me interrupt you a second. So, it's now common knowledge everywhere that Toronto has more cranes in operation than any other city in North America, for sure, and some suggest it's actually anywhere in the world. I don't believe the latter part, but in North America, that's true. And I ask myself, and I'll ask you because you're a lawyer in the business, where do they get all the workers for all those high-rise buildings?
Well, I'll tell you, the numbers would indicate, the numbers make it clear that the guys who are working in construction in those cranes and down below in the job sites, it's no myth, it's no joke that many of them, if not most of them, are working here as undocumented workers illegally.
So they're outside the parameters of a PNP program.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers on PNP are devastatingly poor for those construction people.
So why are you showing me all this stuff about digital workers and computer analysts and all of those?
Just so the audience will see that there is no will, either in Ottawa or in Ontario,
Queen's
Park, to give these people a chance to become legal and pay taxes and raise a family here. Ottawa.
So I'm a guy who used to go to the public, knocking on doors, asking them for support. Nobody was ever embarrassed to say, Joe, get off your rear end and do this. What's happening? Is there a culture change? People no longer knocking on the door of their politically elected people?
What I think is happening, my opinion, is that the people are still asking, and they're complaining and they're bitching. And I think, but what's happened in Toronto, where the cranes are, is that we have elected very poor leadership for the City of Toronto, federally and provincially.
Poor defined as not willing to speak up.
Not willing to speak up. They all know. Nobody is stupid. We don't elect stupid people, but we elect cowards who are not prepared to stand up for their community. MPPs and MPs from Eastern Ontario, the North, Southwest, federally and provincially, they will argue for special rules and special numbers for their Francophone small communities, Northern Ontario. In the GTA, in the last many, I would say God knows how many elections, federally and provincially, Liberal and Conservative, we've elected trained SEALs who don't have the courage to send the message that this city has needs, and the city cannot be run on the basis of illegal workers. They talk a good story about the rule of law, but in return, the main industry in this town, which is construction, is run outside of the law.
So, if I understand this correctly in the way that we're developing the discussion, so the province, which has the numbers and should understand that the job marketplace has to be filled in order for those cranes to operate. There's over 90 of them, okay, just in Toronto, not including outside. That's filled by people who have to fulfill job criteria. But they're not the only ones. There's also the housing market, the rental market. There's the assistance market. That's just in the trades. And they're not stepping up to the plate.
And what's really spooky, Joe, is that those people, by being undocumented, illegal, that the province and the feds are losing at least $3 billion a year in taxation at a time where Queen's Park and Doug Ford are just slitting their own throats politically by the death of 1,000 cuts. They have this cash cow of $3 to $4 billion just giving these people a document, and they pull in enough cash.
Well, how do they do that? Now, I think I know, but I'm not sure very many people who are watching us appreciate what that means. So if I'm working in the trades and I'm earning, say for the sake of argument, $32 an hour, and probably working for cash, probably working for less than $32 an hour.
Sure. If you're making $32 an hour, either you're working as a subcontractor, in which case you may pay some HST, but the moment you get to $30,000, you just get a new HST number, and you never even pay the HST, and you never pay income tax. If you work for a large corporation,
But if you're not paying income tax, now, just taking a look at what the federal rate is, the federal and provincial rate
Sure.
in this province, is at around 39%, maybe 40%. So you're telling me that if somebody is working in the trades and is earning, say, for the sake of argument, $60,000 a year, they ought to be paying about $24,000 in taxes.
You're not paying.
And that's $24,000 for every undocumented, illegal worker.
That's
In other
right.
words, something that could be rectified immediately with a PNP program
It could be.
targeting those people.
Absolutely. You know, Doug
And so
Ford.
that would be money that would be going into the Ontario and federal treasury.
That's right.
You got an estimate about what that number is?
Sorry?
Do you have an estimate of the number of people who fit into that category?
You know, just in the construction trades alone in Ontario, it's a minimum tax base $3 billion that isn't being touched by government.
Somebody's derelict.
Well, somebody's making that money, but that's another show for another day. But the problem is that, well, I want to get to more to the details of the rules, but the guys who are making it clearly are using their influence at Queen's Park. Before they focused on Ottawa, and they had enough clout for the last number of years to make sure that those workers were not legalized. And the folks making the money are organized, and they do not want these workers legal. And they're using, I don't think it's clout. I think what they're doing is they're going to government and saying, you know, if you legalize these workers, there's going to be, they create confusion. And from this confusion, politicians say, oh my God, we don't want confusion because it may crash the construction here in Toronto. They don't even want any discussion of illegal workers here, undocumented workers in Toronto, because the people making the money are threatening government with the possibility of a construction shutdown in case this becomes an issue. That is an empty threat from people who have no power. But that threat resonates politically and with some bureaucrats, even though it's empty.
Well, so having been there at one point, and it's unfair for me to say this, one tries to balance everything, take all of the issues, put them into balance. But if somebody came up with numbers like the ones that we've just exposed today, whether they're perfectly accurate or whether they're an approximation, it suggests a trend that has to be dealt with. Now, we've talked in the past here about these criteria. I think a few moments ago you said there are 8 different streams. 8 different streams.
Let me talk about these streams for a second, if I could, just for the audience, the folks who are interested, because a lot of people.
We're closely running out of time.
We're running out of time. Well, then we're gonna. Well, give me a. Okay, we'll do it next time then.
No, just keep going.
Okay, so for let's say in Ontario, people think, oh, if I can just get an employer with $1 million and a good employer, and then I don't speak English, then I can become an immigrant. Now, that is partially true. So I just want the folks to realize that for workers, construction workers here and trades workers in Ontario, there's a breakdown of 3 separate programs. For the skilled trades, it's called skilled trades, and that includes all, not just the trades, but includes construction, computer people, doctors, lawyers. There's a language barrier of level 5. For foreign workers in skilled trades, they have to show that they've been working for work experience 1 year. It's the same as the federal CEC program. It's an express entry program, which means you must pass the English exam. So this program is out for 95% of our audience. The foreign worker program here in Ontario covers all construction, all jobs, all computers, and you have to show work experience of 2 years in the last 5, and once again, now the good news there is for foreign workers, there is no language requirement. This is the key. This is what turns everybody on and it gets them all excited. But the boss has to show, the employer has to show in Toronto a minimum income of $1 million and have 5 employees. Now, some of the bosses, employers will cooperate, some won't.
I can't imagine why any of them would. But, Richard, I hate to be the devil's advocate
No,
here.
but let me finish. The last program, Joe, is called Indemand Skills. And this is causing a lot of interest in the community because it includes things like personal care workers, truck drivers, laborers, etc. Here it is. Language level 4, that is the killer. And so just so folks know that. And if you're illegal, if you're undocumented, which most of the people in Toronto are at this stage, will be or are, then the PNP will not process you. You have to leave the country. And if people ask me, well, Richard, if I leave the country, is it guaranteed that I'll be processed? The answer is no.
Yeah, no.
So you leave at your own risk.
Exactly.
So
correct me if I'm wrong. The temptation on the part of anybody. Once you make the decision to be here illegally, why would you leave?
Well, there was a day many years ago you could trust the system to process you after you left. Can't do that anymore. There is absolutely no logical reason to leave because you're thinking your application may be processed.
So I'm an old person. I need a personal care worker, somebody who understands that I want, the bedpan or I want a cup of milk or something like that.
Yeah.
Why do I care whether somebody can write a PhD thesis in English or in French?
Because, when you were minister, the way you thought and the way most rational people, would think.
It's the first backhanded compliment somebody gave me.
Is that the strength of the PNP program would allow the province to deal with its own regional reality. And
every sector, every industrial sector would deal with its own reality.
And to get away from the slavish devotion to the Ottawa bureaucrats who try to put everybody in the same cookie cutter on immigration. What's happening here in Ontario, and this is why I think the Ontario program has been a disastrous failure, is that they are now looking for cookie cutter solutions.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. So that's why they built up what Doug Ford did, essentially. He built up a phony expectation by saying, truck drivers, okay, personal care workers, now you have the chance to become an immigrant. Oh, by the way, language level 4, please, and the legal work permit, please. But they don't give work permits. You had the Minister of Employment here, or whatever, a couple of days ago.
I do, yes.
Patty, and she won't give an LMIA in Ontario for a personal caregiver or a truck driver. But
or construction.
Construction is still theoretically possible. But so here, Doug Ford is saying, you're a personal caregiver. You're a truck driver. Well, then you have a chance to show your experience. You can work here. Nonsense. The only guys who can perhaps do this are folks who can from India who can. And I'm not say what I'm saying is that they can pretend to pass the language exam. They can maybe get an LMI from one of their cousins in Brampton. That's why this was invented by Parham Gill and the boys.
So let me. We got to come to the end here, if you'll allow me.
Sir.
So, the PNP program is essentially designed to put a potential worker on a job site with a specific employer or an employer in a particular sector.
Yeah.
It's not easy because people are abiding by the rules, as I see it, and maybe you have to beat up on me in another program. So the advice that somebody has to get and give from a meeting like this is that you got to call up somebody who's competent. So the first thing is, I don't know whether we've got the number for your number down at the bottom of our screen, but that's for people who want to talk to a lawyer, and you can refer them to anybody you want. I certainly can't, and I won't. But the second thing is that there is a solution. There is a good solution to all this, and you've pointed out part of it is this bogus discussion about language. That's something that the current minister, Ahmed Hussein, has not addressed. Put up his number as well. So you've got a number that you can call if you want assistance for navigation. You've got to get a good, competent lawyer. Don't be embarrassed. I think you're a good, competent lawyer. And then you've got to be able to start putting pressure on the political system. Why don't you start with Ahmed Hussein? He's just around the corner from here. Go knock on his door. Call up his phone. Call up his number, and tell him.
Because he won't give a damn.
Well, yeah, you know,
And worse
he's going to
than
have
that-
to answer the door soon.
Well, in October, he's going to be out of a job anyways. Who cares? Why even
So
waste time
call
on
him
the
now.
guy?
Call him now.
He won't, between now and October, it's just a complete waste of time. What I would suggest our audience does is think seriously. We have to choose caucus people from the GTA who won't just be party hacks and do what they're told.
So why don't we do that in upcoming programs?
We will do that, sir.
Because we don't know who all the candidates
Well, why
are.
don't you
just
get
yet.
him in here?
Well, we've made an invitation out to everybody. They'll start coming. As you saw, we had one minister come in.
Yeah.
I went to see another one. We have requests from members of parliament who want to come here. And, you know, we'll pepper them with the questions that your audience is talking about.
Maybe since it comes down to language and other specific issues, provincially as well as federally,
Both of them.
why don't you work on the feds? I'll see what I can drag out of the bin in Queen's Park.
Yeah, well,
And we'll see
not a
what we can do with
problem.
these guys.
Anyway, I
Okay.
came here to be a guest on the show, and now I've got a job to do. And I, you know, like all of my jobs, the pay for it starts with a zero,
How's it
runs
end?
for 3, then there's a period, and then ends in another 3 zeros. Thank you very much.
You're doing God's work.
Yeah. Joe Volpe for God and for country.
Absolutely.
And for Corcan Media Group, for Go Live TV and Corriere Canadese and Law and Reality, thanking you for following us. Continue to follow us on social media and call the people that I suggested. We'll see you next time. Ciao.
Ciao.